and then I'll start a timer, and then a couple. Here, let me pause it real quick. And go ahead, bro. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much. So, my name is Mike, and I'm an alcoholic and drug addict in recovery. And, I think, it's important, to get out there that, I think a lot of us start off with a pretty normal lifestyle as children. And, I had the same for whatever reason, whatever happens, we have a tendency to fall into an addiction. And that's kind of what happened with me. I was, in art school, doing well, graduated and, went right up to Portland to work in a job in advertising. In that job, I was thrown into the fire. I was, already like, you know, groomed to do an art director's job, but I didn't expect to be thrown into the fire like that. So there was a lot of stress involved. It was one of those things that, I felt like, I was constantly dropping the ball. I mean, I was learning as I went, but in reality, I was actually doing a great job. But along with that, came a lot of accolades, a lot of celebration. You know, we had beer clients, we had beers on tap. It just became a normal lifestyle to roll into work and, have a beer while, sitting at my desk working. Sometimes we'd roll out into the fire escape and smoke some weed. And, it was one of those things in advertising. All of that was totally fine. It was socially acceptable. And when stress got high, we would, unwind that way as well. And we just got through the days that way. It was super high pressure, high stress, and everything was done like at a level of 10, if you can imagine. So if it was really stressful, we'd break off for lunch, go and have drinks, smoke some weed, come back. Um, Whenever there were wins, it was not unusual to be rolling into the office in the morning and like pouring a cold one. So it really sort of became ingrained in my lifestyle early on. And by then I was using it then as a coping mechanism. It was to the point where I was drinking every day and I was drinking throughout the day. Um, you know, I really saw like myself begin a gentle spiral down as I kind of began to work the levels up in work and using it more and more as a coping mechanism. Then I got recruited to Austin, and the stakes were much higher, the clients were more high end, and I was traveling constantly. And it wasn't just around the United States. I was being sent around the world to work. And there were, months where I would be gone and overseas. And it was like a huge party. I mean, that's kind of the way it was. But at the same time, we also had a lot of responsibilities. There were millions of dollars at stake. So it also like got higher and higher and higher. So it was like my addiction just grew in congruent with like the level of stress, celebration, and everybody was in the trenches and doing all the same things. So as I, moved up on the ranks and then, continued to go down that path, I started to see myself begin to really slip. I got to a point where I just could not keep up with work anymore just because the drugs and the alcohol were really beginning to take over my life. There were times when I had to be hospitalized, and the worst part about it was, coming back from the hospital you know, nobody knew that I was actually in the hospital because I would just call in sick. And I would roll back home in an Uber from the hospital and stop at the liquor store. And that was sort of, the cycle that, really brought me back down. It was a humbling experience. And, my first time in rehab, I got sober via AA and maintained for quite a while. However, being back in the trenches, doing the exact same thing over and over again, I succumbed and bottomed out worse than ever before. And, it came to the point where I was ghosting work. I simply wouldn't even call in. I would just not show up. And a good friend of mine, actually, I was having some construction done in the house. Work had called him saying that, I had missed several days and they just wanted to do a welfare check. So they sent him over, the contractor let him in, and he found me passed out on the bed. That was when the real turning point happened. And he's like, my man, you need to go to the ER, you need to get checked out because everybody is really concerned about you. And I having experience of being hospitalized and knowing that this trip to the ER is going to wind up into a hospital stay. I debated whether to actually like pack a bag, but I didn't and wound up going to the ER. Um, and I remember sitting, with the doctor and he was he was like, "What's going on? Why are you drinking so much?" And I just flat out told him I just hate my life. And that opened up a whole new can of worms that I wasn't aware of. Apparently, that prompted like a social worker to come in, Austin Police Department suicide squad to come in. And I wound up staying at the ER like way into the wee hours of the morning, being questioned, making sure that I was going to be okay to be released. Meanwhile, I had friends go on to the house, take care of their dogs, dump in the booze. So it was really like this confluence of events like within that short period of time that just made me sort of like, geez, I got to do something about this once and for all. So once everyone was convinced that, I had accepted the idea that, I just have a huge problem, I started talking about going to rehab. So the next day I went into detox. It was supposed to be a 16-day detox. However, I was able to get through it in just 6. And you know, it was a bit of an eye-opening experience because the last time I was in rehab, detox happened in ICU. And so I didn't have the experience of being around other people who were struggling. So I was sharing a room with a heroin addict who was coming down, and it was an awful experience to see what he was going through. And he and I would stay up late and talk, um, having the experience of detox and being around others that were, also in the same boat, really sort of like charged me to really kind of begin to take all of this very seriously. And having had that experience early on within detox, it motivated me to go to IOP. And that was, I believe it was a 9-week program, 3 days a week for 4 hours in the evenings. And it was great. There were a lot of speakers, there were a lot of people involved. And in the periphery, social workers would come in, counselors would come in, interview you and talk to you. Some would sit in the sessions with the rest of the group, and they singled me out. And it was one of those things where I had already commandeered a sponsor. I was doing all the right things, but they singled me out and kept me after and talked to me. And it was the counselor and a social worker, and they were like, you need to quit your job. You just need to flat out quit. And that was August 2019. And so when was it 2019? I think so, yeah. So I quit my job. I put in my resignation. I went through, the whole course of the exit, interviews and all that stuff. But it was the realization after doing all that that I just felt lighter. It's like suddenly this huge weight was like lifted. So, it was also then that my sponsor was really kind of trepidatious about me quitting my job. But, I was actually fortunate enough to just not even worry about the money, to quit the job and actually, have a little bit of reprise, just a way to, recollect and be able to reflect on everything. Just being able to slow down and find that peace really helped me. And I think helped to solidify my sobriety. And you know I was also beginning to really think about, like, and COVID, by the way, was beginning to happen around me. And suddenly we're thrown into isolation. We had to wear masks, it's like faces look different. So it was like the whole landscape changed. And I was really concerned about, having to be in isolation once again, once, we had already experienced, and for me, especially experienced isolation, because in the very last months of my addiction, I would just isolate. I would just completely like check out and not worry about anyone. I wouldn't answer the phones. I wasn't social. So I was afraid that I would relapse. And I had already been cooking this idea in my head of featuring stories of people in recovery and using it as a way to inspire others. And my girlfriend at the time recommended that maybe before I jumped into that, I started an Instagram. And that was launched August of 2020. And what was cool about that was I found this freaking amazing community out there that were just, you know, we were all in the same boat. And I felt suddenly like surrounded by really great people of like minds, and sort of a strength in the community was kind of renewing my own strength. And before I knew it, I started collecting stories. I was putting them out there. The website was built and set up, and it was just once a week I would put out a new story, and I would get stories from around the world. So it was not only the stories themselves, but having, that one-on-one interaction with people that really solidified, my sobriety, and having that constant contact. And I felt like being imbued in, a community that was like in recovery, non-judgmental, and with the ability of lifting others. It inspired me to do the same. And I was able to do that with stories. And as I moved on, I think deeper, I started volunteering and doing a lot of different things. I became an ambassador for, other people. Um, I started running my own social media group within Facebook. and then, before I knew it, I started taking on like legitimate clients as an art director or designer to volunteer my time to help them along as well. So it's been like this weird wavy ride with enormous ups and downs, and it's still a challenge to kind of keep working. Even though I initially got sober using, with the principles of AA, I found a path that was really beneficial to me. And that path has been through a community, putting stories out there and supporting others. And there's, this quote of, being, I can't remember the quote. I'll probably butcher it, but Gandhi was talking about, the idea of immersing yourself in service would allow you to grow and become a better person in that way as well. So I had kind of stumbled upon that path just by accident. And it was a huge benefit to me because, and I felt like immersing myself in a community and being of service not only allowed me to learn from other people's trials and tribulations, but it also showed me that, I'm not alone, and that, maintaining recovery is possible, and, we're able to maintain and get along just fine. So one of the things that I love to put out there through my stories is the idea that, there are so many different paths that you can take. And it's usually, a path that suits you uniquely. And it could be via a very spiritual path. It could be, using the steps of AA, but doing alternate things to augment it. People, like you said, it was, people find physical fitness as a way to motivate them, helping others is a way to motivate them. So whatever the passions that you have, it really helped me to really blend that with my recovery. So it's been a rocky road. It wasn't easy at first, but I was able to do it. And I have over 5 years of sobriety. My sobriety date was April 9, 2019. So yeah, it's possible we do recover. Sometimes it just takes effort, and it's an everyday thing.
Uh, Tell us a little bit about your website, and how people are able to put stories on there and like what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. It's soberpress.org, and it's a very simple website. It's just a picture and a story, just for context. It's literally a timeline of a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning is very much in a way of a background, how you grew up, maybe whatever the people choose to talk about. But then the middle is really has to do with the recovery or the addiction itself, and then the recovery as the end. And I always ask people to contribute some advice for those that are struggling or are new to recovery. I feel like, the stories really kind of usher a way to inspire others into the same. And my mission is, if I can nudge somebody in the right direction, job done. That's my mission, to allow people to know that it's possible to recover and that they're not alone.
Yeah. Uh,
So soberpress.org.
Soberpress.org, and what's your Instagram? Tell us a little bit about that.
So the Instagram is soberpress at soberpress. And it's really, I think, a tool of inspiration, a tool of information. I try and put forth at least one or two a day. I also use it as a way to announce stories that are coming up on the website. And I also use it as a way to connect with my community, and that's the crucial part. That was the part that really helped me along through the pandemic, and having that daily contact. So look for at Sober Press, and hopefully inspiring posts, sometimes informational, sometimes a way to learn.